Hey YouTube, welcome back to another episode of WeDeyCode. Today we'll be looking at HTML forms, so stay tuned. Remember to like this video, subscribe down below and press the bell icon to be notified for every new episode or video that we publish here on WeDeyCode. Remember that we also have a playlist for coding and tech career tips. We have another playlist where we have longer videos and we call them codecasts. So please make sure to share this video with all your friends or colleagues who are interested in learning how to code. All right, let's get right into it. We're going to create a document here called forms.html. Okay, now that's created. I'm inside of VS Code, remember? So let's just go ahead and type not doctype HTML lang equals -us, just as we've shown in previous videos. In the head, our title is going to say, what should we call it? HTML forms. Okay, then we're going to have a body. Oops, just hit enter. Okay, now if you remember, in the last video we looked at different things, like we looked at inputs, right? Type equals text, so that's this, and okay. And if we open our file in the browser, you can see up here that we have our text. Okay, so just going to reduce that, take it all back. So now I'm going to introduce you to something called the form element. So what does the form element look like? So essentially, the form element is what you'd use to capture a lot of user input. So instead of just picking, oh, here's the username, here's the first name, here's the last name, what you do with a form element is you capture a lot of information in a single group, and usually or always after capturing all this information, you will then perform some action on it. For example, to submit it to an external website, an external server. So let's check this out. So let's look at the label element. So label, we'll get to that first later. But before we get there, let's type in input. So input type equals text, and we're going to say ID. So this is a new attribute you're saying. When we give something an ID, what we're saying is that this is the only element in the entire document that has this name. So an ID is a way to reference a very specific element. So I'm going to say ID equals first name, and then the name of this form, of this inputs, is going to be first name. Okay, so close that. Then we can just add a break line there. Okay, now what about this label? What does this label do for us really? Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. So obviously beside the text, we would like to see some information, right, that describes what it is instead of just a blank box. So we're going to say label for, and we're going to reference, so you can see. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you can see we have an input type text. Its ID is first name, and in this specific form, inside of the form, we're calling it, so the ID is f name, sorry, and then inside this specific form, we're calling this first name. So we're going to copy this and say this is the label for this item. And what we call it? First name, as you can expect. Okay, so we're just going to take this, copy it, and paste it. So now it's last name. Copy this, paste it here. Now L. Okay, so let's refresh the page and see what that looks like. Voila. So WeDeyCode YouTube. So that's our first name and last name. Okay, so now that you have that, what else could we do with it, right? What if you wanted to do something like username and password? Okay, so let's just create a break line here. Okay, then let's just paste what we had before. Okay, so here we're going to say username. Copy this, paste it here. Then we'll change this to uname. Now we're going to say password. Then type will not be text, type will be password. Okay, ID, we can call this PWD, and then the name is password. So just as before, the name of your input element is what you put inside the form, the for section of the label. So in the beginning, we said this is the label for first name. What is called first name? This input. This is the label for last name. What is called last name? This input. This is the label for username. And that's this, and so on and so forth. This is the label for password, and that's this. And you just put the label text inside of it. So now when we refresh the page, you can see it's right there. So WeDeyCode, you see we are at, so on Twitter, we're WeDeyCode. And for a password, let's see. Oh, well, it doesn't matter because you can't read it. So now, what about in a case where there are radio buttons? You might be wondering, what is a radio button? Okay, so let's do this. Let's comment out this form, or you know what? Let's keep it. So you use a horizontal line, and we'll start a new form. Okay, so now with this form, we're going to use input, and we'll say type equals radio, and ID, let's call it true, and name is what should we call it? True. Okay, let's call it is subscribed. Actually, this is easier. Subscribed. And we'll say the value equals, so the value is what you okay. So let's call this true actually. Or no, yes. Because if you ask someone a question, you want them to respond appropriately. So another thing, you can write the label down, it's all good. So this is the label for yes, and we're going to put this, close this here, and we're going to say yes. So let me just put this down. Making some mistakes here, bear with me. Okay, then we're going to say, so let's see what that looks like. So you can see down here, there's a radio. So what is the radio? It's this. Okay, so now let's just do something very similar. So just going to put this down. This time I will say nope, nope, and no. So okay, let's see what happens. When I refresh this, you can see it's one or the other, right? If I click one, the other is no longer there. Why? Because the radio is it all exists within the same form. And what I'm doing is I've given them the same name. So the same name here is subscribed, right? So that's actually the main reason, not just because they exist in the same form, but because they have the same name. Okay, so this is an opportunity for me to say, if you haven't subscribed, please click on the subscribe button down below and press that bell icon. Okay. Next, we're going to look at checkboxes. So checkboxes are closer to multi-choice. So they would allow you to change, to select more than one thing. Okay. So this time in our form, okay, so let's do this. Okay. Then let's call this radio inputs. Well, essentially they're buttons, so we call them radio buttons. And now we're going to say multi-choice buttons, otherwise known as checkboxes. Okay, so what do? We create an input, and as you guessed, type equals, oh, there it is, checkbox. And then we say ID. Let's say ID is what should we do this time? Let's say Apple. Okay, and then name is going to be Apple, and value is Apple, that in that manner. So now when I create my label, so this is going to be a label for Apple, and when I close this, what I'm just going to put in here is Apple. Okay, so you might be wondering, what's the difference between this and this, right? This is just the label. This is what the person actually selects. So instead of saying this, let's say I ate an apple. Yeah, let's just say something like that. So now we refresh the page. Before that, I should add a horizontal line. Okay, oops. Yep, so I ate an apple, true, right? And you can see I could toggle it off or on. Unlike this, where nothing changes except I select another radio button in that same form group with that name. Okay, now we're just going to copy this. Let's add a break line. Let's think of other fruits. Let's say something like banana. That's always the obvious choice. Okay, banana. We save that, and let's add another one. orange. Okay, orange. So we have apple, banana, orange. So now we've saved it by hitting Command S or Control S. Right. So remember, when if I were to delete this, right, this turns to a white circle and a 1. And if I were to save, that changes. That the 1 disappears, and this just changes back to an X. But obviously, I don't want to do that. So I want to leave an O in form. So I save this, and now I refresh. Okay, I hit an apple, check. I hit a banana, check. I hit an orange, check. So you can see it doesn't, there's no toggle like this one. Okay, so that's a checkbox or a multi-choice. So you can use that for multi-choice options. So let's do another one. So let's call this, so forms are usually submitted, right? So let's submit this form. Okay, so what are we going to do? Let's just take what we had initially. Okay, so I'm just going to borrow from up here, just the username and password. And what should I call it? So at the end, I'm going to say inputs type equals, can you guess, submit. Okay, and I say value equals, let's say sign login. Okay, so let's see what happens. This needs a break line, does it? Okay. So if I type my username WeDeyCode and some random password and I click login, how come nothing happens? Oh, it looks like it just refreshed the page, right? So what is the proper way to actually get this done? So there's an attribute on the form. So you see the form itself is also an element. So you can have attributes. So ideally what's meant to happen is you're meant to say, oh, there's some action where we send this user to another page. Let's call it sign in, dot something. Let's say in some cases PHP. And then we could say, oh, the method is get or post, or well, in this case, post. But you don't need to worry too much about that. For now, you could just leave it as this, and it's okay that it just refreshes and doesn't actually do anything. And that's it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching up until the end, and I hope you were able to learn valuable lessons about HTML forms. Please remember to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future updates from WeDeyCode, and to also like this video and share with anyone who you know will be interested in learning how to code. We'll be proceeding to more content in the future, and I hope to see you soon.